UCLA last year in 2021. I graduated with a double major in political science and communications. And at UCLA, I was a peer advisor for CCCP, hence why I'm here today. I also worked as a tour guide and I was in student government. I was the chief of staff to our transfer student representative in USAC. I don't know if any of you go to the BRC, but if you do, then you may know Zuleika. So I was her chief of staff. She's great. Ever since I graduated, I have been working full-time. I work for a communications firm, which focuses on advocacy issues. So our clients are people like Black Lives Matter, the ACLU, Chanel Miller, health nonprofits, things like that. And I'm from Northern California, so I transferred from Sacramento City College. I'll pass it over to Kelvin now.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Kelvin. I just transferred last year to UCLA. So I just finished my first year. I transferred from Pasadena City College, so I'm from SoCal, 66 area, San Gabriel Valley. I'm currently a nursing major, so I actually technically have 2 more years left. And some of the orgs that I'm currently involved in, last year, I was a volunteer for the Transfer Student Center. I was also involved in USAC as an intern, so that's the Undergraduate Students Association Council, so student government. I was also a McNair Scholar. I'm in a couple of nursing associations as well, and I'm also involved in a little bit in CCLR as well. And my affiliation with CCCP, I'm currently a STEM peer advisor. So.
Cool. Okay, let me resume screen sharing and we will dive in. So this is intended to be a workshop, so interactive. So if you have questions, pop them in the chat, unmute if you want to talk out loud with us. We want to not just be talking at you, but with you about these questions. So we're going to go through each question and sort of brainstorm together. Yeah. So in terms of the PIQs on the UC application, there's one required question that everyone must answer. And then there's 7 more questions and you choose 3 out of those. Each of those are 350 words max. And you get to choose which 3 questions you answer out of the 7. So as we go through them today, you can see which ones are most relevant to you, your experience, what you feel like tells your story the best. And all these questions are equal. There isn't like one better question or one worse question. It's entirely up to you and what you feel like allows you to tell your story the best. Okay, so the required question is to asking you how you've prepared for your intended major, including your readiness to succeed in your upgraded classes once you enroll at your university of choice, which we're manifesting whatever you want to get into. So this is where you can talk about your intended major. For Kelvin, nursing. For me, I entered as a poli-sci major. And then once I was at UCLA, I added the comms major. So my essay talked about my political science interest and focused on classroom experiences, how you grew your interest, how you showed it in classroom experiences. Maybe you did research, maybe you were in an internship. If you had experiences outside of the classroom that helped you develop that interest, like personal experiences, maybe your family. I talked a little bit in mine about just my family sort of immigration story and how political science is not just sort of like some kind of theory, but affects real people's lives and can help or harm real communities and people. What other influences have steered you towards this and how it's tied to your long-term goals? So Kelvin, what did you talk about in yours?
Yeah, for me, it's a little bit more personal, but I basically talked about like what motivated me to go into nursing. And I talked about like some of the clubs that I was like involved in, how I gained like some healthcare experiences through those clubs and some opportunities like attending pre-health conferences through those clubs at my community college. And then sort of talked about how like some of the internships that I did how that allowed me to gain some clinical experience. And then that part about upper division courses, I kind of just mentioned about how just my journey throughout community college and how that has taught me how to really balance all these things, and also prepared me to like prepare me for like the increased course load and the difficulty of the nursing program, and how that can allow me to be successful.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Kelvin. Is anyone here, do you all know your major yet? Do you know yet what you're going to be talking about? Maybe you could put your major in the chat or unmute so we can brainstorm together what you might talk about. Cool. Biology, sociology, seeing a couple business econ or econ, film production, that's very cool. English, civil engineering. Cool. Well, lots of different ones here. I'm seeing some of my majors, poli-sci and comms. I see a question about minors. Yes, you add that once you're enrolled and accepted. Cool. Lots of different a breadth of majors. Does anyone know yet what you might talk about in this question? Are you thinking about clubs, internships, personal experiences which have grown your interest in the subject, like why you're interested in psychology or why you're interested in biology or communications or engineering? Matthew, you can do whatever you want. If you would like to unmute, that's awesome. If you would like to chat, that's cool too.
Sure, I guess I can mute. So in my case, I'm interested in sort of like either finance or marketing. And I recently just got like a marketing internship or like a summer job. So I guess I put that onto this question.
Awesome. We love to hear that. I sort of work in like marketing right now, but congrats on your internship. That sounds like a really good experience to talk about. Looks like Emily's in the chat also talking about internship with the public health department and some personal experiences with health. So I think those are all really good ideas that you both have. And you can really look at this question as an opportunity to go a little bit deeper, because on your application, you're probably going to say like, I took these health classes, or like I did this marketing internship, but you're not going to be able to, that doesn't tell them what you learned there or like what you experienced and how that influences what you want to do in the future. So your question answer here is your opportunity to tell them your story and make those resume bullet points a little bit more fleshed out. I'm going to pass it over to Kelvin now for our first question.
Yeah, so this is the first of the 7 PIQ questions. As Maxine mentioned, you're required to answer 3 out of the 7. And this first question asks, describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. So these are some of the guiding questions that will help you sort of craft your response to the PIQ questions. But yeah, so like this question essentially really is asking you to really describe or discuss a leadership role you had. And so it's really asking you to like reflect on some of the impact that you had on others during like your leadership experience. And I think for many people, like leadership, they think, it's really constricted to just like leading a club or like being a board officer. But I think leadership can really come in different forms. Like, for example, like if you've ever mentored someone, or if you've like taken care of family members, or even like taking initiative like at a volunteer position, for example. So like it's really important to really think about how you define leadership. So I would make sure like you write about something that's like really important to you. And so like I mentioned, it doesn't necessarily have to mean like you're the person like in charge or something. Like you can discuss how like you've contributed to group efforts like in a collaborative way. Like for example, working closely with a team of others, like and how that has like resulted in like a positive outcome, right? And so I think some of the tips that I have like for this question specifically is to really provide context for your answer, because um, I think just uh, a great way to like discuss leadership is by demonstrating how you noticed like something was missing and then like stepping up to like fill that role. And so I think like specifically like admissions officers, they really want to like hear about um how and why you ended up in the position that you were in, but they also want to know like what you did in that position and like what you learned from it. And also like really talking about like your actions and the impact that you had, right? And then like um getting into the specifics of like how you got the, like I mentioned, how you got the position and then like what you did. Um but yeah, like I think the main thing is just to really like reflect on the experience that you had, and then like um and really just like reflect on your role and what it had like on the specific community that you um had a positive impact on. So yeah, this is like I didn't specifically answer this question. I don't know if Maxine you did, but if you guys like have any ideas or like what you guys have in mind, if you guys can put in the chat, that would be great. But if not, that's also okay. We can move on.
I think I actually did answer this question.
Okay.
It's hard to remember because time is a construct. But I think going back to what Kelvin said earlier about viewing this not just in like a leader is a person in like a formal leadership position. I think I talked about my younger brother here. And I'm sure if anyone here is an eldest Asian daughter, you know, but I I thought that was an opportunity where I could talk about being a leader in a less traditional way and how I've seen him grow up into someone who is, you know, not a terrible person, and how that role in my family contributed to my overall development. Anyone have any ideas for this one in the chat? Unmute. If not, no worries, we can move on. And also if we move on, but you think of something after, feel free to unmute and put in the chat. We're not like tied to a slide we're on. Matthew, yes.
Yes. So I guess for mine, I wasn't really too sure if whether to include this if I were to write it in my application or not. But I guess one would be reaching back to the robotics team in my high school that I used to be a team captain of. The only thing is that I'm majoring in business, and I guess that's more of like an engineering focus sort of I guess extracurricular. So I wasn't sure if I was going to include it, but yeah, I guess that would be my choice if I had to.
I think that totally fits. I mean, it's not like you're going to talk about like how you put together a robot in your essay. So it's sort of like it's a club, it's a collaborative effort. There are many people going on. And I think in business, that's a skill that you need to sort of integrate and synthesize all of these different people's opinions into one path or like one agreed thing that you can move to together. So I think thinking about how the skills you learned there or the experiences you had in that robotics club are transferable to a business situation. I mean, what if there's like a robotics company out there, right? Like that's a business situation. And it can even help that you know a little bit more of the technical stuff, so that you're not, you know, you're a well-rounded person. You're not only like a robot. You're a human with many different interests, and that's a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to the next question you could choose. This is every person has a creative side and it can be expressed in many different ways: problem solving, original and innovative thinking, artistically. Describe how you express your creative side. So some brainstorming options below are thinking about when your point of view was unique, thinking about if other people might have viewed that a different way, if you have a passion for some sort of art form, music, theater, dance, visual art like painting, graphic design, and what you've gained from these creative experiences that have affected other parts of your life. I think I also actually answered this question as well. I hope I'm not going to say that for every question, but I think I answered this question as well because I've always had sort of like artsy, craftsy hobbies. I like paint, I draw, I like cross stitch. I happily spend like 7 hours in an art museum. So it's sort of like been part of my, I guess, like my primary hobby for as long as I can remember. And I talked about that and just what I've learned from incorporating creativity into my life, and how that can help you, or that can help me be a creative thinker as well. And just, again, like I said before, experience my different interests and integrate them all. Kelvin, do you have any thoughts on this one, or anyone in the chat or unmuting? Not everyone all at once now.
Hi, I have a question about the required question.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so the question says like, how have you prepared for your major? I was wondering how far can we talk about, because for example, I'm a civil engineering major, but I did a civil engineering internship in high school. So I was wondering if I can talk about that in my application.
I think you totally can. I think your essay, it's like pretty short. It's like 350 words. So I think you just need to be intentional with your the flow of your essay. I don't think there's like a point in time where it's like, no, like maybe when you were 5, you decided you wanted to be a doctor or something. Like that's a pretty cool thing to share, right? They wouldn't be like, that's too far in the past. You can't say that. I think in mine, for example, I talked about how like I grew my interest when I was like much younger, hence talk about my family. And then I talked about some high school experiences and then community college experiences. So I think if you tie it all together, that's a really good way to do it, so that you're not sort of just only talking about one thing that happened in high school. Does that make sense, Daniel?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, I'll pass it back to Kelvin for the next question.
Yeah. So for the third question, this asks like what you say is your greatest talent or skill, and how have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? So for this question, those are some of the things to think about. These are some of the questions that you can brainstorm on. For example, like listing some of the talents or skills that you have. What are what were these talents or skills like the same from a few years ago? What changed? What improved? Which of the 3 do you think is most meaningful, important to you, and why? And does this come naturally, or have you worked hard to develop the skill or talent? I think this question like is asking really like what you do best. So you should really like write about like a time that really stood out to you when you were like the best at something. Like, and if you're having like a hard time thinking about like a particular talent you have, like you can always like turn to the second option the prompt is asking, which is like about a skill. And I think a skill like honestly can be like anything from like an accomplishment or like a trait like you like about yourself. And so, but I think for this question particularly, just from personal experience, you would want to try to like include sort of like a narrative arc to it. because I think that what they're really looking for is like a story of like what your talent is and like how you developed it and why it means so much to you. So like, you could probably like write about like an obstacle you faced like while performing this specific skill or talent, and then like demonstrating like how you grew from it and how you like overcame that obstacle, right? And so you really want to, I think for this specific question, like to show that you really value your creative pursuits and that you have like um, creative skills that you will bring to the UC campuses, right? Um, I think some of the tips that I also have is, well, I think the major thing is to really think about like what you're really passionate about for this question. And like, for example, like what have you been doing, like practicing for years, right? Um, and I think just um, really like, do you see like do you fit this accomplishment like into like who you are like as a person and like who you hope to be, right, on a UC campus? I think that's like one of the main things like to really consider for this question. So I personally didn't write about this question too, sadly, but um I'm not sure if Maxine did, but if you guys have any ideas, you can always you can put down in chat or unmute yourself. I see a hand. Yeah, Matthew.
Yeah, so I had a question actually regarding this. So for this question, the first like instinct I think of when reading this is sort of like a job interview almost, in sense of like, I don't know if the skills or talents that I write should be pertain to my major specifically, or should I focus more on like things that make me, I guess, more human and more like cultured, I guess creative sort of based.
Yeah, great question. I don't think it has to necessarily pertain to your major. I mean, these questions that are presented to you are really trying to get a full picture of who you are as a person. Like I think admissions officers really want to get to know who you are beyond, just your major, because I think the required question that they ask is your opportunity to really like already talk about your major. So I think most of these questions that they're asking in the PIQs is really to get a full picture of who you are. So I think it's not just limited to what you mentioned. I think, like I mentioned, like you really want to like show like what you value, like your creative pursuits. And I think it's definitely really appropriate to talk about like what you mentioned for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Sophie.
Yeah, so Vincent has a question in the chat about photography and whether or not he should answer the creativity question or the skill question. And I would say it's totally up to you. I honestly would recommend looking at both questions side by side, kind of seeing the difference, what's being asked, right? So in this question, it's like developed and demonstrated, right? That's a huge part of it. So maybe if you look at both of them, maybe try and answer both of them with photography. And if you're like, you know what? This works a little bit more in the talent or skill question, then put it under there. So that's kind of my suggestion for that one, or that question that you have in the chat.
Thank you for jumping in, Sophie. I totally agree. Don't know if I could have said it any better. Okay, question number 4. Describe how you have taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or worked to overcome an educational barrier you have faced. So this one is sort of two sides of the same coin. You could talk about an opportunity you took advantage of and really made the most of it, or a barrier that you had to overcome, and talking about the challenges there. This is not a question that I have experience with. So anyone, Kelvin, anyone thinking of answering this one?
I can jump in a little bit. I actually did answer this question. I think for this one specifically, they're asking for you to really talk about like an educational opportunity. For example, like it could be any kind of like programs, like for example, like CCCP or EOP that or pathways, like anything like that that you've had participated in college, and talk about how you like found out about these programs and what you did to take initiative to get involved, and like exactly what you took from that experience, and talk about how that it tied into your um you know your major, and like how you learn to apply it in your schoolwork or just any other aspects like in your life. um for me specifically, I did talk about um an opportunity that I found outside of school, but you're not necessarily confined, for example, like like for like an opportunity like you found within the campus. But for me, I did talk about like this program that I participated in. It's called America Needs You. It's a program that helps first generation college students in their professional career paths, and they basically pair you up with like a mentor. It's a 2-year program that I participated in, and essentially I talked about like how I discovered about that program, and then how I took initiative to really use up their you really talk about all the resources that they provide and how I was able to take advantage of the resources. They had a bunch of workshops that I participated in, and I really just explored different ways how I could network and get involved, and how that has really taught me, the benefit of making personal connections and really pushing me to advance my professional skills. So that's kind of what I talked about. And yeah, that's, if you guys have any like ideas or questions, you can ask or mute as well.
I think we have a question in the chat. Can you mention more than one program, or would it be better to go in depth with the one program that appeals the most to me? What do you think, Kelvin?
I think for that question specifically, I would probably just focus on one specific program, because you only have 350 words. It's not a lot of words to write about. And I think it'd be more impactful if you really stick to like one specific opportunity, or yeah, for one specific opportunity that you took advantage of, that has most meaning to you, and that you've gained the most from it, rather than just talking about like different programs, and that kind of causes you to like go on a tangent sometimes. So I feel like just having a more focused approach if you can just stick to one like one program and really expand on it, and talk about how you really learn to apply what you learned, and then what you learned from it. Unless it's like specific like programs that are under like the same umbrella, if I'm making any sense. Like for example, it's like programs geared towards like first gen students, and if you're like participated in like programs like EOPNS, like pathways, stuff like that, then you can like mention about how those programs really like helped you prepare you for college, and then like how you found out about them and what you learned, and then how you applied it, right? If that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Totally makes sense.
Yes, makes sense. Thank you.
Gotcha.
Sweet. Emily, I also see your thing in the chat. I think Calvin's advice for Keen's question, correct me if I'm saying your name wrong. I think that is also really good advice for your idea of fee waivers, scholarships, and EOPS, because we don't want this question to be like a paragraph form of your application. We don't want it to just say like, I was in this program and this one and this one and this one. We want it to be a little bit more so you can talk about your experience. All right, question number 5. Describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you have taken to overcome this challenge. How has this challenge affected your academic achievement? So this is pretty similar to the last question, but this one is sort of more of a life challenge, I suppose. Sophie helped me think about the last question as more of an academic barrier or an academic opportunity, whereas this one is more of a a life challenge and how that has affected your academic experience. So that's how you can sort of differentiate the two. I actually think I answered this one as well, and I talked about my mental health and just my experiences with anxiety and depression and learning a lot from that, and including like how to take care of myself, experiences in I'm Chinese American in Chinese American immigrant communities, which are not super friendly to mental health and illness, and sort of end capped it with a, I guess, like a success story of how every day is, you know, a lesson, but I'm happy to have been able to like help others now with the experience that I've gone through and not just sort of had them and forgotten about them. So that was me. Kelvin, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I actually also wrote about this question, even though it is very similar to question 4. But this one, like Maxine said, I think the major difference is it's really asking for like a significant challenge, as in like any kind of setback, right? That you like a major setback that you had, and somehow and how you responded to that setback. Like it's really like, I think for this question, it's really asking, they're really looking for your problem solving skills in a way, I think, because when you're reading this response to this question. So I would really make sure you're focusing on describing like how, and not just like the what, right, in this response. And really it's asking you to show like how you're really able to perform under pressure, I think. And that I think admissions officers really want to see that you can prove that you can face like any challenges that come your way, and that you won't be overwhelmed when things take a turn for the worse. So like for me, still a personal, but for me, I kind of wrote about how my significant challenge was when I got diagnosed with cancer, and that's how and the steps that I took to overcome that was that, you know, I learned throughout that process how to really be more of an advocate for myself as a patient, and how that really inspired me to go into, I kind of tied it into my major in a way too, because you know, I mentioned about how that really inspired me to go into nursing, and how that journey has really, I kind of reflected on my journey in my response and talked about how that has also affected my academic achievement in a way, and how I turned that into like a positive. And I talked about, you know, although like having, you know, being diagnosed with cancer like significantly altered my educational path, like it really gave me a more focused perspective on my academic and career aspirations. And so I felt like that was like the perfect response to this question. And I think that really, I think it was really, really impactful the way how I structured it. Sorry, I'm like kind of not articulating my words, but it's also really important because I think this question, the second part of the question is also, I think a lot of people don't really, a lot of people don't really like address it sometimes, but I think it's really important that you respond to the second part of how it, like the relationship between the challenge and your academic achievement, because like, you know, be sure to also address like how the challenge like impacted your academic achievement in particular. Like the challenge doesn't have to be an academic one, right? But you should like describe how like overcoming the challenge like resonated throughout like your life, and like I mentioned in my response, how it changed my perspective, and maybe like it provided you like a new way of thinking, or altered your academic path in some way, right? But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to add for this question. Yeah.
That's super valuable advice. I think in my question as well, I connected it a little bit to my academic interest as well, in just talking about how my experience with my own like mental health prompted me to be more interested in like public policy, for example, and how that is communicated to different communities and groups, and like how can we improve public policy or improve the political experience of people participate and are communicated to and communicate with, so that our, you know, our health outcomes are better and we have like healthcare, including mental health care, and all that stuff. Tobias, see you have a hand up.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the chat because I don't really want to talk about it out loud.
For sure, no worries. Okay. Let's read this. Okay, so it sounds like we have a big situation. We don't want to describe it in just one essay. We want to put it in 3 essays because it fits multiple questions, but we don't want to repeat ourselves in all 3 essays. Each of them talk about a different aspect of educational background and challenges, such as creative ideas, theater, the parental expectation to be a doctor. I feel that my younger brother is a freshman in college right now, and my dad has given up on me being a doctor. It's not going to happen at this point, but he's going after my brother now. Let's see. And then there are challenges to hide the theater experience, and a story to get away from family abuse through your passion. Okay, that's a really personal experience, Tobias. Thank you for sharing it with us and being vulnerable. Let's see. I think that I can definitely see how that fits multiple questions. So I think your idea is really good of focusing on a different aspect of that overall question in different experiences, such as maybe in the creative question, you could talk about what theater like brings to you. Maybe like what you've learned from theater, how you've grown as an actor or a writer, or however you participate in theater personally. So maybe that's more of your focus in the creative question. And then maybe the family part of it fits in a challenge that you've overcome, are still overcoming, because it doesn't have to be like this thing is in the past and I'm like never talking about it again. Because I think with many of our challenges in life, it's not as simple as like a speed bump that you forget about in the rearview mirror. But they're things that we're all like working through ongoing. And so maybe that's another question to focus on. What do you think, Kelvin?
Yeah, I think how you worded it is what was good. It's very complicated. I get that it's when you have a lot of ideas all over the place, I think it's really important to just like jot down your ideas and then kind of brainstorm like exactly like all what your ideas are first. But I think for me, I think before like really deciding exactly what if you're having trouble like really just deciding which questions to choose from, like I would say like to see which ones like would fit fit what you want to write, is to really like read each question carefully and just kind of see which ones like have like you have the most to really expand on your story, and then that you want to like that you can talk about and discuss more about, and then just go on and write about it. And it's gonna be like a trial and error process like throughout, and you'll have like people supporting you like with your essays throughout the whole process. So but I think what Maxine said, I agree 100% with what she said. Yeah.
I also think just going off of what Kelvin said, I think you can think of like editing this as you go on, and you don't have to like, you don't feel like you're, wedded to whatever you do. So I find that with me, it helps to sort of like almost word vomit everything I have in my brain down. And don't worry if it's like 10 pages long, but once I have everything in my head like down on the page, then I can go back and edit. So maybe you can try that method out, and then when you read over what you've written, you can see like, oh, this part like fits more in this question, and this part fits more in this question, and this part maybe is extraneous and I don't need it at all. I saw your hand go back up, Tobias.
Yeah, I just because it's kind of hard to talk about this because because they don't know anything. So like talking it out loud kind of it's hard to hide it. So I just typed more stuff, and I would like to like ask if this is like a kind of good outline, because it's kind of hard to like ask this question without giving like a huge summary, I guess.
Of course.
Basically, it's like I'm just kind of worried about talking about the same thing or like kind of repeating the same theme, but it's just I know for sure from what I kind of drafted or thought about. To me, it kind of seems like the 3 essays can talk about like 3 very different things, but kind of connect into like kind of like an overall story, because it's kind of hard to write like here I'll type this.
No, that totally makes sense. Okay, let's see your outline. So it looks like for the creative question, we have theater, participation in that, and sort of being able to hide it so that you can keep participating. And then for the educational barrier, we have some struggles to learn acting with no prior experience, cultural barriers. Yes, the old Chinese saving face. We are old enemies. And negative, perhaps beliefs inherited from your mother. We are also old enemies, that thing and I. And then lastly, the significant challenges you have faced to overcome, and then talking about the family trauma and abuse and finding a way out to heal. Okay. I can see how that would be really difficult to fit into 3 essays that can only be 350 words each. So I think the way that I would advise to approach this is focusing on how you think this applies to your undergrad college experience, because it's important to remember that these are ultimately admission essays for a college. It's not like a personal memoir or just like a personal essay. There is sort of a goal at the end, which we are trying to achieve. And in that, it's like knowing your audience, typical comm major here, knowing your audience, because you're not going to write the same way to a anonymous admissions officer as you are to a friend, or I wouldn't even talk the same way as I do to all of you to an admissions officer. I would probably sound much more professional and put together. So maybe that's one way you can sort of think about your 2-decade-long story, to focus in a little bit more on how the creative stuff, how the family, how you're healing and taking care of yourself and advocating for yourself connects to the opportunities you have, that you hope to have at this college that you are applying for. What do you think, Kelvin?
Yeah, I definitely agree that at the end of the day, like what you mentioned, it is like they are just admissions. These are like, college essays, and like it's very important that you like kind of know your audience and know who is like reading your essays at the end of the day. And yeah, I think that's just I think when you have a lot of ideas down, like a lot to write about, it takes a lot of time just to like figure out like how to like like write everything fit everything into like each question. But I feel like if you highlight the most important things and how you're keeping in mind like you're keeping in mind uh like the like when you're writing responses, like to try to align it more with like your undergrad experience and like the UC's. I think they'll go more into this in detail like at the boot camp, but if you're going to go to that, but what I learned is like tying my responses like to the missions and values of the university, because at the end of the day, I think that's what when they're the admissions officers, when they're like reading these responses, like they're trying to see like how you can contribute and really put and really contribute what you can bring, like what can you bring to their university. At the end of the day, like if you just keep that in mind, and I think you'll be at a really good place, like if you just, you know, keep that focus in mind. But it is a very like long process. I acknowledge that. But like we'll have like you're gonna have like people like supporting you throughout the whole process, and I have, you know, 100% confidence that you'll be able to get this through. And yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think before we move on really quickly, I think that just in terms of like figuring out what you want to talk about here, for example, I think a lot of my own like mental health story, I didn't share in my essay because I was like, this is for therapy. This is for like me and my best friend. This is for me and like my closest family member to talk about the rest of our family trauma. Like this is something that I don't want to share with this random admissions officer because I don't want them to know that about me, and I don't think there's a point to them knowing that really, really personal story from me. What I do want them to know is that I had this experience that was hard and I'm learning how to overcome it, and that shows how I can overcome any sort of educational challenge or other challenge that comes my way, because that was what I thought the admissions officer would be paying attention to, like how I could contribute to the school, and that's sort of ultimate goal. The rest of the stuff, that's for me to work out in therapy, in my own journal. Okay, let's move on to the next question, and also happy to talk more in the chat or over email. Question 6, what have you done to make your school or your community a better place? So this is a sort of leadership focused question. What have you done to contribute positively in your school, your community? And again, like with the previous leadership question, you can think about this not in a super traditional good thing kind of way. You don't have to start like your own charity. They can be small things that have a big impact. They can be things where you are inspired to act in a certain way and learn something from your effort to make the world a better place. I did not answer this question, but I can see how a lot of things could contribute to this. Your job, your school, your family, your neighborhood. Kelvin or anyone, are you thinking of answering this? Does anyone have any ideas? If not, we can move on, or in the interest of time, to our last optional question. Okay, we can finish it up without Kelvin. Thank you for co-hosting with me. Last optional question, beyond what has already been shared in your application, what do you believe makes you stand out as a strong candidate? So this one is sort of your catch-all. If there's anything that the questions previously didn't prompt you to talk about, this is the one where you can really grab it by the reins and tell them what you want to tell them. If there are experiences that don't fit into the previous prompts, this is where you can really brag a little bit about yourself and share your story in a very flexible, open-ended way. And I believe that brings us to the end of our workshop today. And Aaron has another tip in the chat about how you can structure your essay, super helpful. An intro going into the past, the why, background info, interests, or experiences, the body with a couple paragraphs on the present time, what you are doing. If you can hear my cat, I apologize. She's very talkative. What you are doing in terms of jobs, internships, your classes, and concluding with your future, what you aspire to, your goals, your outcomes. Thank you, Matthew. I will tell her that. And I think that is it. I'm going to leave my contact info in the chat as well. So if anyone wants to brainstorm more or have a proofreader, I'm happy to help.
Thank you. Yay. Let's do a round of applause for Maxine and Kelvin. I'm gonna do a virtual applause. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for answering all those questions that were thrown at you. Thank you. You both were just amazing. Doing this last minute on the fly. Oh my gosh. What's your cat's name?
This is Luna.
Aww.
She's done.
She just meowed you.
You did.
Aw.
She's like, put me down. Thank you so much, Maxine. I think Kelvin already head out, but thank you. We are so grateful that you were here and presenting. And y'all, Maxine was part of the Diverse Asian American Planning Committee last year, and it was just amazing. And she was just like in charge. I was like, oh my gosh, like get out of her way. Thank you so much, Maxine. All right, y'all, we're gonna head into our break. If y'all can be back by 12:30, you need to stretch, get some water. Just all